Hey everybody, Brian here, Forrest Outdoors. Just got done talking to you in my previous segment about the skirtless jigs that I was using down at Lake of the Ozarks in October to win the final Lake of the Ozarks event for my club. But now I want to talk to you about the pattern. And the pattern was very unique, and we put it together over a course of 3 or 4 days of out on the water. Down at Lake of the Ozarks, it gets a lot of fishing pressure at times. As most lakes do, you have to figure out a pattern within the pattern. And not only is it relating to what the fish are or are not doing, but it also times looks at what the angler is or is not doing. And when I say that is, we started the day out Thursday night, Friday morning, and we had a good idea of what we thought the pattern would be. We started out on secondary points, working into the backs of coves, fishing two types of baits. A jig with a skirt on it, so your standard jig and trailer, as well as a crankbait. And the crankbait dove anywhere between 4 foot and 6 foot deep. And what we would do is, once we get into open areas, we would cast that crankbait trying to cover water. But as soon as we came up to a dock or any type of structure, we'd throw that jig. And as we worked our way back further and further into the creeks or back areas of the coves, we'd really start hitting up a lot of docks and focusing on that jig. At Lake of the Ozarks, you really try to figure out where they are on the docks. Docks is the most abundant amount of structure or cover on that lake. So you really have to figure out, are they on the outside, the sides, the backside, the walkways, the inside, the outside, underneath. There's so many different areas on the dock that you really got to spend some time in the first few to pick it out. But as soon as you pick up that first and second bite, it tells you something. So the first bite we got on Friday, was a crankbait. We'd work in between the docks, and on our way out, as we already fished an area, I would throw my crankbait on the corners or docks, and I would start catching fish on those corners. Now granted, I understood that Friday was cloud cover, a little bit of wind, not too much, but it was overcast skies. And I knew going into Saturday and Sunday that those conditions were going to change. We'd have slight less wind, but we're going to have clear bluebird skies. So where those fish were positioned are going to change. Not only did I catch them on crankbaits on the side of docks, I would also catch them on the jig on the very sides of docks. So I'd pitch over to the side, maybe where a ladder is, and I drop down and let it sink. I caught one or two, but nothing large or anything to kind of really get excited about. So then what happened Saturday was we continued with that pattern. We started off secondary point, once again worked our way back, fairly clear water, hence why I was using a red fleck within my plastics. But what we did was, as we worked into the backs of coves, we started working those docks. And I paid close attention to where some of the fishermen were in that cove, because there was 3 fishermen in that cove fishing the same area. So as I was fishing with the crankbait, I'd work the corners of docks, work the sides, thinking that would be the pattern. I caught one, got pretty excited, but I kept looking over my shoulder, looking at what the other anglers were doing, and they were fishing the very same pattern. They were fishing the outsides of docks, the corners of docks, the fronts of docks. And I began to think about, what are the areas that they are not fishing, or are they missing? And this specifically is what popped into my head. We came across the dock and we saw a walkway. And there's 2 types of walkways on Lake of the Ozarks. There's floating walkways that are just on flotation buoys that are sitting on the water floating. And then there's cemented or foundation docks or walkways that go to docks. We would fish both types of walkways, but on probably 30 minutes to an hour into the first cove, as we were working the way back, we came across a concrete piling that's holding up the walkway of the dock. And I skipped one of these jigs down into that area. I casted both on the front side and on the back side, and I had a backlash because my reel was not set to skip those types of docks or skip that area. So I had a backlash and started pulling line out. And I tightened, adjusted everything, and realized that it took probably about 10 seconds, 15 seconds to fix it. Pretty good backlash. Immediately then, felt the line and felt a fish on it. Set the hook, brought it in, and had a keeper for the day. So after putting those 2 things together, I'm thinking, no one's fishing these areas. I'm watching 3 or 4 anglers go through an area and not touch any of the structures. This is all new water that no one's realizing or taking advantage of. Fished a couple other areas, tried the floating docks or floating walkways, and didn't have any luck, and came across a dock that pretty much was enclosed, meaning no one could really get to the other side of the walkway unless they walked onto the dock or skipped a jig way far under. So I skipped a jig, and in fact one time pitched over the walkway to try to get into that new area, and once again caught a fish. So I was getting pretty excited, going into Sunday, because this is the pattern and how it developed. Saturday we had 4 fish, really didn't key in on the pattern, but as I thought about it Saturday night, I said, no one's fishing that area, so I'm going to focus simply on that. So by the start of Saturday morning, I had 2 jigs tied on, and I threw these all day long. And we focused on areas on the walkways of docks where there was cables, where there were concrete stakes into the ground or metal stakes in the ground. And anywhere that those 2 key areas came into play, whether it be on secondary points or the backs of coves or on the north side or the south side or the shady side, we would get bites anytime we'd come across an area that had, concrete pilings into the ground. And that was key in our day on Sunday. We went to a couple different areas on the lake and followed that same pattern, and we caught a 20-pound back. And it was a blast. The only challenge is we had to practice our skills, knowing where and how to skip the jig. We had to make sure that we had quality rod and reel. I was using my Ardent Elite reel and a 7.6 medium heavy rod. The line I was using was an XPS fluorocarbon 17-pound test, and this is key. As I'm casting in the areas, I'm skipping underneath cables, or I'm going over walkways, or I'm going in between walkways, and your line is going to get frayed. Lake of the Ozarks is very harsh on line because of the conditions and area that you're fishing. Docks will tear your line up. I have a video that I'll show you guys later on. Is I cast through the walkway of a dock and I get a fish. Well, after catching the fish and somehow netting it, I look at my line and I had 4 feet of just gashes in that line where it was rubbing up and down. I immediately had to cut my lure, cut the line, retie, and this happened multiple times throughout the day. By the end of the day, I had, a good 50 yards of line on the deck because of, areas that I really hadn't mangled up. But I was getting into those areas that no one else was fishing, and that's a key. To get on a pressured lake and really fish it hard, it happens from time to time, but figuring out that pattern within the pattern, that area that no one else may be touching or may be thinking about. This was critical in our win over the weekend out at Lake of the Ozarks, and it was a lot of fun. So, that said, it's something that I learned from the lake. It's something that I want to teach and educate you guys about as I go through these experiences, so hopefully you've learned something. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have any suggestions, please feel free to visit the YouTube page that you're watching this. Feel free to watch my other videos. Feel free to visit my Facebook page or go to my website, forrestoutdoors.com. I'm always looking for suggestions, ideas, and ways that I can help you guys when you're out in the water. That's really all I have for today. If you're going out and fishing Lake of the Ozarks, make sure you get a jacked baits jig tied on. Take the skirt off and throw a trailer on it. It's something different. It's something unique, and it's a good fish catcher. And when you're out in the water, just kind of pay close attention to those patterns, what those fish are doing, and every time you catch a fish, it tells you something. So take note, figure something out, put the pattern together, and have fun out on the water. Thank you very much for watching my video. Look forward to posting the next one. Until then, we'll see you out in the water. You guys take care. Thanks.